A grieving mother is speaking out after her daughter was shot to death in Chicago's South Loop. Tina McMiller stood this morning near Cermak and State, the same spot where 31-year-old Romeca Meeks Blackman was shot and killed during a school drop-off on Monday. And she says her daughter was loving, supportive, and an amazing mother.
She loved her son. She loved me. She loved her siblings. And I loved her the same. I want justice. She didn't deserve it.
Leaders there also called for tougher action against violence and enforcement of House Bill 158. That's a state law that declares violence a public health crisis. No charges have been filed, but police had called the shooting domestic in nature.
This is what's new. As we're sitting here talking now on your platform, Holly Johnson, the shooter, has been released by the Chicago Police Department and is not facing any charges. Now, that doesn't mean she can't be charged later on, but she's currently not being charged with anything because, and this is really important, she said the right things. She had, first of all, she had a license for the gun. She had a CCL, and she told the investigating officers that she was in fear for her life. Okay. Now, Naja, you have to remember, with that language and with not enough facts, they have to release her.
Does this have any, you mentioned something earlier. You said about 75% of the people in that jurisdiction that commit these types of crimes are released. Does this mean they're never charged, or maybe perhaps a month from now when we get other facts or a media storm happens, she might be charged? Or are your sources thinking that this case is done, it's over, we've moved on?
Of all the cases similar to this in the Chicago area, 75% of them are released and never charged. In this particular case, she's been released and is currently not facing charges, but under pressure from the social media, under pressure from people that are watching, that's possible that it could change. Now, also, to put another twist into this story that people don't understand, Carlos himself is facing some potential charges.
I think things can get really complicated when we're thinking about the ego, parenting, human behavior, and people's entitlement to their own children, and jealousy, and absolute jealousy, and just the inability to control one's impulses. We're saying what kind of a man? Yes, hey, this dude is being demonized for sure, but
you know who's lost? I don't know. You know who's lost in this conversation, Naja? Think about it. That little boy has to come out of school or be taken out of school.
Ooh.
Somebody has to tell him that his mother was gunned down at that school, and then he more than likely, I don't know the family dynamics, has to go home with that father and potentially the woman who killed his mother. And she's not going to be charged.
She has gotten away with it.
Sit here. She is not going to be charged for the murder.
According to the state, the murder that she rightfully did, that she rightfully committed.
I don't want people to be outraged at the Chicago Police Department. The Chicago Police Department presented the case to the state attorney's office. Okay, they brought the case in the state attorney's office. Let's be really clear on this.
The state attorney's office was like, we ain't got a case. We don't have a case. This is a clear. So they're saying it's clean cut self-defense. Let's wrap it up. Let's go home.
But I'm asking
the state attorney's office.
Right. So this is why I want, because I got a lot of calls on this and I didn't want to talk about it, but I promise you I will talk about it with you because I know the story is personal to you, because I know you have a similar situation. I want people that are watching to understand you can put pressure on the state attorney's office. She needs to be charged. She was 15 feet away. She walked into a volatile situation, and there was no reason why that woman should be dead. There's absolutely no reason, and you've got to remember, she brought although she had a CCL, she took an open weapon, outside of a school.
At a school,
children, and she murdered somebody else in cold blood. And 9:30 in the morning, people still there. You could tell by the video that you're going to show people. So, I'm outraged by this. I think it's disgusting.
So Romeca Meeks' killer was released, y'all, and she's not going to jail. She's getting self-defense. I feel like this is something that we need to talk about. Like, this is a real touchy topic, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm a mother. So I had to get myself together before I even decided to talk about this. But I think that y'all need to know the real story. because the real story is not being told. So many of y'all probably heard a story about how a single mom was dropping her kid off at school, and then the baby daddy and the new girlfriend came up to the school to unalive her. But what wasn't being told in the media was that the baby daddy actually lived a block away from the school, and the woman was not, her life was not taken outside of the school. If you look at the video, it was actually like a store, which was like closer to the baby daddy's house. So long story short, what's being told now to authorities is the baby mama was coming to bring her son some lunch, but she saw the baby daddy's other baby mama and she attacked her. So keep in mind, Romeca had a restraining order out on her baby daddy, but the baby daddy's new girlfriend had a restraining order on Romeca. So from footage that I've seen, both Romeca and her baby daddy was both toxic towards each other. They were both popping up on each other, you know, trying to fight, being violent, being aggressive, breaking each other's things. This was a two-way street. So I'm not denying his part in any of this, because he was the main antagonizer, and he's the reason why these two ladies were at it in the first place. But I just have to put the facts out there, because I have to be non-biased, because the story was not originally told correctly. And see, now the community is going to be outraged because people are thinking that a killer is walking free when it's really not the case. Unfortunately, Romeca was attacking the other baby mama, the other girlfriend, whatever you want to call her. And that's when the baby daddy put her in a headlock. And after she was released from the headlock, she was trying to go attack the girl again. And as the story is being told, that's when her life was taken.
A mother drops off her child at school in Chicago's South Loop. Minutes later, she is lying on the ground, shot in the face in broad daylight. Witnesses say it began as a fight. Police say it was domestic. But the suspect taken into custody was later released without charges. Her name was Romeca Meeks, age 31. She was a mother, known in her community as Big Meeks. On that September morning, her ordinary routine ended in an extraordinary crime scene. The question is, what really happened outside that school zone, and why does the case remain shrouded in unanswered questions? Police confirmed she was rushed to Stroger Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Her son, just dropped off moments earlier, now faces a future without her. Investigators said little, calling it domestic. But was that the whole truth? As details emerged, her family demanded answers. They held vigils, spoke to the media, and confronted the painful reality that justice seemed uncertain. Even worse, fake fundraisers quickly appeared online, people exploiting her death for money. The family had to step forward to expose scams and direct supporters to an official GoFundMe, designed only for her son's future. This is not just another case file. It is a story of a young mother, a shocking murder, an investigation clouded in silence, and a family forced to battle not only tragedy but exploitation. So here is the question: what really led to her death? Why was the suspect released, and how do we separate truth from deception in a case that continues to stir suspicion in Chicago's South Loop? Welcome to Undiluted True Crimes, where real stories meet hard truths. We dive deep into true crime cases solved and unsolved with a focus on facts, timelines, and justice. Each episode is created to inform, educate, and honor the voices often forgotten. If you're drawn to raw truth and powerful storytelling, you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us on the path to awareness, only on Undiluted True Crimes. On the morning of Monday, September 9th, 31-year-old Romeca Meeks followed her usual schedule. She drove her son to school in Chicago's South Loop. Witnesses recall the day as ordinary, clear, and busy with routine traffic near the educational zone. At approximately 9 a.m., Meeks successfully dropped off her child. The act was routine, but the next moments changed everything. Shortly after leaving the school premises, Meeks encountered a woman near the 2200 block of South State Street. Accounts confirm a physical altercation broke out between the two women. The cause of this confrontation has not been clearly established by investigators, but the clash escalated rapidly in front of bystanders. As the situation intensified, the unidentified woman involved in the conflict produced a firearm. What began as a heated exchange became lethal in seconds. During the confrontation, a shot was fired directly into Meeks's face. The attack occurred in broad daylight on a weekday morning, close to where children were beginning their school day. Emergency responders were immediately called to the scene. Paramedics arrived and transported Meeks to Stroger Hospital, one of Chicago's busiest trauma centers. Despite medical efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The sudden death of a mother in such a visible and public environment created immediate shock in the community. Individuals present at the scene provided consistent reports. Witnesses stated that the verbal dispute and physical fight between the two women directly led to the firearm being drawn. Observers described the event as fast-moving and unexpected. Some accounts mentioned that the suspect and Meeks exchanged physical blows before the weapon was used. Others stressed how quickly the gun appeared and how abruptly the confrontation turned deadly. Bystanders were left shaken at the sight of a woman being gunned down during morning routines, close to a school zone, and with commuters nearby. Several called authorities immediately, while others attempted to provide aid until first responders arrived. Chicago police officers arrived at the scene and quickly detained the female suspect believed to be directly involved in the altercation and shooting. She was taken into custody for questioning. However, in a decision that drew public attention, the suspect was later released without charges. Police have not confirmed the reasoning behind this release, and the decision has fueled ongoing questions surrounding the case. Hospital officials confirmed Meeks's cause of death as gunshot trauma to the face. The injury was fatal, leaving no opportunity for long-term treatment or survival efforts. The confirmation placed emphasis on the immediacy and severity of the violence. By the way, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers this month. Be part of the journey. Click subscribe now. The Chicago Police Department described the shooting as domestic in nature. This classification implies that investigators considered the possibility of prior personal ties between Meeks and the suspect, or that the altercation stemmed from a domestic dispute context rather than random violence. This stance has raised questions because the shooting took place in a public location, outside a school area, in front of witnesses. Several unresolved questions remain at the center of this case. 1. What triggered the altercation? No official statement has provided details about how the argument began or why the confrontation escalated so quickly. 2. Did the suspect act in self-defense or aggression? Investigators have not released evidence to suggest whether the firearm was used defensively or offensively. 3. Why was the suspect released? Despite being detained at the scene, the suspect was released without charges. This decision has left the community demanding clarity. The absence of charges has been interpreted by many as either a lack of sufficient evidence or a pending review of facts. Authorities confirmed that the case is still under evidence review. Statements suggest that law enforcement is analyzing video footage, witness testimony, and forensic findings before deciding whether formal charges will be filed. Investigators have not disclosed whether the firearm was legally owned or registered to the suspect, or whether additional individuals are connected to the case. The fact that no charges were immediately filed has added tension and fueled public scrutiny. Families of victims often expect swift justice, but in this case, the official decision to release the suspect has raised doubt about how the justice system is handling the matter. This development highlights the complexity of prosecutorial decisions in cases categorized as domestic incidents, where evidence must meet certain thresholds before charges are applied. In the days following the shooting of Romeca Meeks, her family became the central voice demanding clarity and accountability. Her mother, Tina McMiller, emerged as the most outspoken. She stood before cameras and reporters, stating firmly that her daughter's death could not be dismissed or quietly processed as another statistic. McMiller repeatedly stressed that the city of Chicago must treat gun violence as more than a criminal act. She described it as a public health crisis. She referred to the growing number of victims across the city, pointing out that the same cycle repeats without intervention. For her, Romeca's death highlighted the consequences of inadequate prevention strategies, and she pressed lawmakers to enforce stronger measures. The family organized a vigil in West Englewood. At this gathering, relatives, neighbors, and friends assembled to mark her passing. The event was deliberate. Balloons were released into the sky as the crowd looked upward, each balloon carrying the weight of remembrance. The gathering was not only for mourning but also for visibility, ensuring that the case remained in public awareness. It reinforced the point that this death was not just personal to the family but symbolic of a broader problem. If you enjoy stories like this and want to support the channel, you can click the thanks button below the video. It really helps me keep making these stories every day. Your support keeps this channel alive. Even a small gift through Super Thanks means a lot. The most direct and devastating impact, however, was felt by Romeca's young son. Having been dropped at school only moments before the fatal altercation, the child was left with an abrupt and life-altering absence. Family members later revealed that he became emotionally withdrawn. Observers described how his behavior changed in the days that followed, a quiet child, less willing to speak, and avoiding groups of people. The child had been close enough to witness his mother alive in her final routine, yet far enough to learn afterward that she would not return. That stark transition left him grappling with a void that no public gathering or statement could fill. The killing provoked immediate shock across the South Loop and beyond. Residents of the area expressed disbelief that such a crime could unfold in broad daylight, near a school, at the start of a weekday morning. The specific detail, a mother being gunned down just after leaving her child at school, intensified concerns about public safety in spaces meant to be secure for families. Local residents voiced fears about how easily disputes escalate into shootings and questioned whether enough was being done to safeguard daily community routines. This case also renewed debates about gun violence reform in Chicago. Community leaders pointed to the incident as evidence that stricter measures were needed to reduce access to firearms. Activists pressed for better enforcement of laws already in place and for expanded support systems that could address conflicts before they turned lethal. The debate quickly shifted into public forums, with questions about whether classification of the shooting as domestic by police minimized the seriousness of the threat posed to the community. Media coverage amplified the case further. News outlets highlighted the unusual circumstances, a confrontation escalating so quickly, a suspect detained and then released without charges, and the classification of the case as domestic in nature. Each report added pressure on investigators to explain the reasoning behind their decisions. Journalists revisited the broader problem of violence in Chicago, and the name Romeca Meeks became a focal point in larger discussions about accountability, transparency, and systemic gaps in how such cases are handled. In the aftermath, a new issue emerged: fraudulent fundraisers. Within days of the incident, several GoFundMe pages appeared online claiming to raise money on behalf of the Meeks family. Some pages described themselves as tributes, others promised to support her son. None had been authorized by the family. Family members quickly responded. They went public with statements declaring that these campaigns were false and unauthorized. They warned the public not to contribute funds to individuals or groups who had no connection to them. This forced the family, already processing a loss, to redirect energy into protecting Romeca's name from exploitation. At a later stage, the family launched an official GoFundMe campaign. This was publicly confirmed and linked only through trusted channels. The campaign was designed exclusively for one purpose: to provide long-term support for Romeca's son. The family clarified that proceeds would go toward his upbringing, education, and future needs. Unlike the fraudulent pages, this official fundraiser carried the family's direct endorsement, allowing supporters to contribute with confidence. This development revealed another layer to the case: how quickly opportunists exploit tragedies for personal gain, and how vulnerable families are to such scams. For communities, it raised practical questions. How can grieving families be shielded from scams during their most difficult moments? Should platforms like GoFundMe carry stronger verification systems for high-profile tragedies? Should law enforcement intervene when fraudulent fundraising becomes widespread in sensitive cases? Do you believe the classification of this case as domestic is accurate, or does it downplay the seriousness of the incident? What measures should platforms take to stop fake fundraisers from exploiting families during their grief? Should law enforcement prioritize immediate charges in cases like this to assure the public that justice will be pursued? How can communities provide genuine support for victims' families while avoiding fraudulent campaigns? Do you think public vigils and statements help pressure investigators, or do they risk fading once media coverage slows? The legal process surrounding the death of Romeca Meeks raises critical questions. The immediate concern is the decision to release the suspect after initially being taken into custody. Police at the scene confirmed that a female was detained following the shooting. Yet, within hours, that individual was released without formal charges. This outcome has fueled discussions about the criteria law enforcement uses to determine probable cause in homicide cases. Prosecutors hold authority to file charges, but they depend on police to present clear evidence of intent or unlawful action. In this case, the available details included witness accounts of a fight escalating to a firearm being drawn and discharged. Despite this, no charge was filed. This decision has been viewed as unusual, given the presence of witnesses and the fatal result. It leads to the central question: was there insufficient evidence, or was the case categorized in a way that allowed for a delayed response? The classification of the shooting as domestic in nature adds another layer of complexity. By labeling it domestic, authorities may have narrowed the legal context to a personal dispute rather than random public violence. This framing can affect the speed and severity of prosecutorial decisions. It also raises questions about whether such classifications are applied accurately or used to justify limited action. Looking at patterns across Chicago, this is not the first time a suspect in a violent case has been released without immediate charges. In several previous shootings, prosecutors delayed filings, citing the need for additional evidence or claiming self-defense complications. Critics argue that this practice creates gaps in accountability, allowing individuals connected to serious crimes to return to the community while investigations drag on. Do you believe justice is being delayed in this case? Romeca Meeks' death connects to larger issues of violence in Chicago. Data shows that the city continues to report high numbers of shootings annually, with hundreds of fatalities each year. While overall crime trends fluctuate, gun-related violence remains a persistent concern. Each case contributes to broader statistics, but the impact is most visible in the lives disrupted at a local level. A significant portion of these incidents involve women, often within domestic or personal disputes. Studies of urban violence highlight that women in domestic-linked shootings represent a vulnerable demographic. Romeca's case fits into this pattern, as authorities themselves suggested a domestic link. These recurring incidents call attention to the intersection of gender, relationships, and access to firearms. The location of the crime adds further urgency. The shooting occurred near a school zone, during school hours, immediately after a child was dropped off. This raises concerns not only for the victim's family but also for the broader community. Schools are meant to represent safety. When gun violence occurs in these areas, it undermines public confidence in the security of children and educators. Beyond safety, the case touches public trust in the justice system. When suspects are released and explanations remain vague, communities begin to question whether justice is consistently applied. This erodes cooperation with law enforcement, as residents may perceive investigations as slow, selective, or incomplete. Trust is essential for solving crimes, and without it, witnesses may hesitate to come forward, further weakening accountability. How should the city of Chicago handle cases like this to restore community trust? The death of Romeca Meeks does not close with a case file. The consequences extend directly into her family, most notably her young son. The boy witnessed the events leading up to his mother's death, having just been dropped off moments before the shooting. The psychological impact of such an experience will likely remain with him for years, shaping his perception of safety, family, and trust. Financially and emotionally, the burden now shifts to extended relatives. Recognizing this, her family moved to secure resources through an official fundraising campaign, meant to support his future education and well-being. At the same time, they were forced to expose fraudulent fundraisers, a challenge that highlights the exploitation families often face after high-profile crimes. Romeca's family has also taken an active role in advocacy. Her mother has spoken publicly about gun violence, connecting her daughter's death to larger legislative efforts in Illinois that treat violence as a public health crisis. This advocacy suggests the family intends to keep the case in public view, demanding both personal justice and systemic change. Community remembrance has been visible through vigils and gatherings in her honor. Neighbors, relatives, and friends have sought to maintain her memory while calling attention to the unresolved aspects of the investigation. These acts of remembrance preserve the victim's identity, ensuring she is not reduced to a statistic. Yet unresolved justice remains. Without formal charges, the case lingers in a state of uncertainty. Each day that passes without a prosecutorial decision reinforces doubts about whether the system will deliver accountability. This unresolved status leaves the legacy of Romeca Meeks not only in her memory but also in the continuing question of whether justice will prevail. 1. Why do you think the suspect was released without charges despite witness accounts? 2. How can communities stop fake fundraisers from preying on grieving families? 3. Should more pressure be placed on investigators to classify this incident beyond domestic? 4. Do you believe the community will eventually see justice for Romeca Meeks? These questions are not only about one individual case but about broader patterns of justice, accountability, and community safety.
Hear you now, witness.
I was actually the one at the scene. So I was the one that was yelling out to arrest her because everybody wasn't doing anything. I was actually the one who called the cops first. And I saw them when they were fighting in the beginning. And I was like, this is not right. He was slamming her with the door when she was standing in her door frame, not even close to the female on the other side. So she was literally standing on the other side of the road, and her baby daddy was literally slamming the door on her back. So she went back into her car, came back out, and then this was when the baby daddy walked towards the other baby mama. After this happened, he grabbed her by the waist. She tried to wiggle away from him. Her arm was like literally almost getting free, with his arm around her neck. This time, because he was holding her by the waist in the beginning and she wiggled out, you know. After this happened, he had her in the, like, almost looking like a headlock to me on the side. And then she stated, the other baby mama stated, "I'm gonna shoot you, bitch. Watch me shoot you, bitch." And he stated, "Oh, she's gonna go get her gun. She's gonna go get her gun. Watch." And after this happened, she ran to the passenger side of her vehicle, grabbed her gun, went around, and when the woman, the mother, you know, who slipped away from him for at least like maybe a good second, as soon as she slipped away, she shot her. And she shot her in the face, on her side, and in her thigh. And I saw him like holding her for a split second. Maybe he was in shock, but after he was in shock, I guess he picked her up, and when she was falling, like a gush of blood fell, you know, like out of her body. And I was like, what the fuck is he doing? You know, like, I don't know, everybody else sees movies, you know what I mean, and they see put pressure on the wound. You know, why weren't you putting pressure on the wound? Why weren't you caring enough? This supposedly was your first baby mama, because when I was on the bus, I heard him and her screaming, and she was literally saying, she was like, "I just dropped off my fucking baby." What? I just dropped off my fucking baby. Are you guys kidding me? As soon as I got off the 21 bus, and trust me, they got it. You know what I mean? Everything that I literally had to, I wasn't gonna let her die like that. You know, I literally looked into her eyes. That hurt me. You know, she said she dropped her baby off, and you don't know who she is. You know what I mean? And I was like, arrest her. She needs to get arrested. You know what I mean? They weren't even thinking. There was another black female cop who came up, and a Mexican shore cop. And I pointed out, I was like, the guns in her car, why wouldn't you give him the gun if supposedly this was, you know, a self-defense? You know what I mean? If it was, hey, here's the gun, this is what happened. It was no self-defense. I swear to you, it did not look like no self-defense. It looked like you shot her because you were just angry or something. You know what I mean? And to me, when she shot her, it wasn't it. The female that got shot, she wasn't with any gun. She didn't have no weapon, no knives, no nothing. So what was it that frightened you so much? You had to run around your car, go into your passenger seat or whatever the case is, and you reached in to get your gun and shoot this woman, you know? So to me, it was a senseless, they were arguing because she was pulling up, and I guess they ended up parking. Why was her car parked on the sidewalk? Because I seen she ran towards the sidewalk to get her gun, and it was a small black vehicle, and he had a black truck, I think. And literally, he came out of his truck looking like real, like he wasn't like on anything but being like mischievous, like nothing but like what was, like he was planning something, you know what I mean? And I called the cops on the first time I called the cops, it was because he was attacking her, you know, and the other girl was just yelling at her, and she was arguing back. So there was nothing going on for her to be like, oh, I'm gonna step back over here to go get my gun, you know. She was nowhere near her. But that's all I gotta say. And I know for a fact that she did get arrested, but he got let go. So hopefully, you know, for what I said and what I witnessed, I just don't want to be, you know, put on the stand or anything to say. I did put a statement in because I know it's necessary. You know, it was a ridiculous, you know, I'm a mom too. I wouldn't want my baby to hear like that, you know, and I wouldn't want me to be laying in the ground. She's a sister, you know, she's a mother, she's a daughter, she's somebody to everybody. She's a friend, you know, and that was bogus to just stand there and look at her like she was nothing, you know. To me, I was literally so mad. My boyfriend was also really mad. He was yelling at them. I don't know if you noticed. He was there too, and I was on the phone with him while this was happening. I would call back at him, and he was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Please hurry." And I even had him run that way. I was like, "You need to run that way to go see if he's okay. Go see if everything's okay. What's going on over there? What's going on? Is she laying in the? Go see if she's okay, you know." And it's just senseless that I felt like I had to go send my boyfriend over there because he was just standing over her like, you know, like, I don't know. But I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for letting me
Oh,
speak.
no, I just want to say, Witness, I want to give you a hug, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for speaking up and being a hero and having the anointing of God on you, to have that courage to speak and have that faith to call out demons in front of them and how they are, because so many people be so afraid to speak out, but not you. And I'm thankful that you have come up here and you have told the truth. You have put truth, to power, and we need more people. Hear you now.